Hi, this is Erica, and I'm the founder of Perfect Legal Video. I'm very excited to have with us today Attorney Nicole Reeves Lavallee. She owns a family and real estate law firm in the Worcester area. She's fantastic and generous to share with us amazing information every single week that we all need to hear. So, today we're going to be talking about legal custody. Is that right?
That is correct.
Why don't we start off this fun topic as usual with a definition? What is legal custody? I mean, that term gets thrown around, and as I understand it, there's a few different types of custody.
There is. And legal custody is one of those things that most parents shouldn't be fighting over. It is education, religion, medical. Who gets to make the decisions regarding the children and those three topics: education, religion, and medical. And it's really kind of limited to those three areas. So again, if both of you are on the same page, the court's going to start with it should be joint.
So when we ask who has the custody, the legal custody, it's typically both parents unless there's something really wrong.
Correct. Well, again, we're going to start out with legal custody is going to be joint unless you tell me otherwise. Obviously, somebody can have completely different views on one of those issues, or they cannot be sharp. But a lot of times it's going to start out with joint and then tell me why it isn't.
Well, I don't want to get you down a rabbit hole or anything, but we've talked about this before. We've talked about the birth certificate, and sometimes people don't know at the time of birth who the real father is, or they just have a baby in secret and they don't put the father's name on there, or obviously we know who the mother is. But what do you do in cases like that if someone's name isn't on the birth certificate?
Well, if you're married, it's going to be presumed that your husband is on the birth certificate. If you're married and you're married to a woman, the other wife is going to be put on the birth certificate that did not give birth. So we're going to start with that. If you're not married, then you, as the father, has to go and put your name on, and the mother would also have to sign, and you'd be basically signing either the birth certificate or an acknowledgement of paternity. So that's the way you get on the birth certificate. But if you don't know, then you probably need to find out before you go down that rabbit hole, because it's very hard to have your name removed once you do sign your name.
Well, and not to go down another rabbit hole, but I love the topic of the wife had an affair and the husband is on the birth certificate, but it's not his baby. And the crazy stuff that happens when they get divorced and the husband trying to play. I mean, I know that's not the topic, but it is always interesting to hear, and I love to mention it.
It obviously does happen, and it's certainly one of those things that comes up. But again, hopefully that husband does know about the affair before his name's put on the birth certificate, because it's, again, going to be hard for him to have his name removed if he didn't know. So hopefully everyone's honest about it. We're putting the proper name on. So even though he's presumed to be the father because he's husband, if boyfriend comes out of the woodwork and signs it and husband says, I'm not on the birth certificate and I don't need to be, then obviously the parties can veer differently. But generally it's going to be the husband-father automatic.
And that's a really fun Phil Donahue type of topic that we can always revisit that another time. So let's get back to the legal custody topic. What if you do have an argument with the other parent on religion or schooling or medical care? I mean, it's funny because when you get with somebody and you don't have children yet, you just think everything's rosy and everything's going to be fine. And even through some of the baby and toddler years, it's not a really big deal. But when they're older and they're going to school and you've got to decide whether it's a Catholic school or a public school, or who's going to celebrate which holidays when they're old enough to understand it, those can be, quite terrible fights. And I'm sure that you've been involved in a lot of them.
Absolutely. And I think, it really depends on how you're going to raise your children. Religious ones can be the hardest or they could be the easiest. So if you're Jewish and I'm Catholic and we want to celebrate our respective religions with the children and raise them in both religions, and then at a later point in time, they get to decide what religion they are, great. That's the ideal world. But then you have people that either absolute atheist versus Buddhist or whatever, and there's going to be conflict over and over and over again about the religion. And it's something that ultimately the court's going to end up having to decide if you can't decide it. Obviously, if we're talking about something minor, like do they go to the magnet school versus the public school, or do they go to the private school versus the public school? Those are things that we can have a more productive conversation on. They're less hostile, if you will. So it's certainly something that the parties can have a discussion with. The judge will ultimately make a decision if you can't, but there's a lot of means that really you should just be able to sit down and kind of hash out, this is the reason why, these are the pros and the cons, and maybe you have to do some kind of mediation or something of that nature, but you should be able to come to a resolution. The medical one is a little bit more complicated because this procedure is elective. No, it isn't. Well, my doctor said otherwise. And you get the tit for tat and the back and forth, and you're going, really? And that makes it a little bit harder because is an elective procedure? Is it necessary? One of the biggest things is going to be orthodontic, because I don't want to pay the cost because, oh my God, that's so expensive, right? But again, we have to look at, is it medically necessary versus is it just cosmetic? So it's really something that one parent will say it's cosmetic, other person will say, no, but they have a space between their teeth and that's going to be really bad when they grow up, and oh my God, they're not going to want that. So really, again, it goes back to how much you're going to fight over those things. And, is there something to compromise on? Maybe you give in on this, but you don't give in on other things. So it really boils down to having a productive conversation and being able to listen to the other party, hear them, and again, what battles do you want to pick?
And that's true. And I have to say, you as an attorney are really good at helping your clients pick a battle. And I know that one of the best things about having an attorney is their knowledge of the law. They know how much certain disputes are going to cost, even if you want to break it down to that. And if that's the deciding factor, are you going to be spending your kids' college tuition on fighting over if they have a bar mitzvah or not? I mean, it really comes down to that. So at what point do you think that it's a good time to bring an attorney in to disputes like this?
Before it gets out of control. Before you start calling the police, you start calling DCF, or you're reporting to the doctor or the teachers that the ex-boyfriend or husband or whoever he is doing this, this, and this, and that's not in the best interest. And then they go, oh, we'll call DCF. Before it gets to that point. So what does that look like for you? It really kind of depends. Sometimes it's just a matter of, I'm going to my attorney to get that advice, to maybe go, what? You're fighting over $20. You know how much money you're going to spend in attorney's fees? What are you doing, guys? And it's just that reality check from a third party. Sometimes it's, well, I'm fighting for this, but that $20 is going to be $20 a month for the next 18 years. Okay, again, but how much is that really going to cost you in attorney's fees? So we always like to do a cost analysis, because you really need to know what you're getting yourself into. There's benefits and there's things that you're doing for, I'm doing this because I'm right. Well, great. You could be right, but again, you could be poor doing it. Or you can take the high road and go, that's not battle not worth fighting for. So really, again, when it gets to that hostility level and that point of no return where you are going to say something wrong, the other person's going to say something wrong, and it's really going to get out of control, that's when you definitely want to at least talk to an attorney, whether you hire him or not, that's your choice. But we can also advise you of other means. So you go to conciliation, you go to mediation, you go to arbitration. There's other forms. You go to parenting coordinators. So there's all these options out there that you guys can take advantage of to help you resolve these issues before it gets out of control and you go, I can't work with them anymore. We can't have joint legal custody. I'm fighting for full custody on everything, and you're never going to see the kid again.
I mean, yeah, that definitely becomes very ugly. And it's funny because people do let it get to that level. And I mean, I know someone who spent $100,000 to get 60% custody versus 50%. I mean, that's what they ended up with. So $100,000. And they regret it later because now they enjoy that time off. So, I mean, do you hear that quite often?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of regret, and there's a lot of, well, sometimes it's like, well, yeah, but I got her. Okay, great. At what cost? And that once that hostility does dissipate and you start talking about it, you're like, what the hell did I do that for? So there's a lot of regret. Whether they admit it to you, probably never. But do they regret it? Quite often. I have a lot of clients that come to me and go, I wish I would have listened to you. Okay, all I can do is keep advising you, and it's your call. And a lot of times when they do that, it's at their detriment, but they can't see it until later on.
It is funny how you have that crystal ball.
I say I do.
I mean, I've definitely been surprised by the things that you predict. Not necessarily a decision. I try to listen to everything you say, but it's definitely interesting. Just the attitude changes in your partner once the divorce goes through, and I mean, there's just so many things that you don't see coming. I mean, even when you say that people are really good friends when they go through the process, and they don't end up good friends by the end of it, and you never think that's going to happen, but somehow you've read that book quite a few times, and
You can usually tell by just the things that people say. You'll get a sense for that spouse or that ex, and you're like, yeah, no, they're going to do the right thing, or they're not going to do the right thing, and you know it. You hear it, especially when you're in a case for 8 months to 2 years. Of course, you know the other party. You know them almost as good as the person that's involved in the case. You just are able to look at it from a different perspective.
And I'm so jealous that you get to do it from the other perspective. A lot less sleepless nights, I would think. But oh, well, I know you have a lot of work to do. So I've always been interested in this. Now we talk about, hey, if they don't agree, the judge is going to decide. And what are some samples of what judges decide on in some of these cases? I mean, if it's Christianity versus Judaism, do they just say celebrate both? It's really interesting.
It really depends on exactly what the parties are able to testify to. Were they baptized? Were they, whatever your religion does, and I don't know all the religions and what their traditions are, but were they raised in that education? Did they, like I said, were they baptized? Were we told everyone that we're going to be raising them a certain religion? Well, if you're holding yourself out to the world as that, then why all of a sudden are you changing religions? So again, the court's going to look at that. Now, maybe there's some absolute reason for that. But we also have to look at what's in the best interest of the children. And that's really a hard thing to do because they shouldn't be torn. A lot of times the religious one kind of went, yeah, we'll deal with it. That one's kind of not as adversarial as the medical one or the education one. Those are the ones that really go people on more than anything else. So medical issue is, again, are they supposed to have this surgery? Sometimes it's, they're supposed to have a feeding tube and they're supposed to have this. And obviously we're talking about very sick children here. But he doesn't know how to take care of them. He's never taken care of them. He doesn't know how to give them the feeding tube. He doesn't know how to change this. He doesn't know how to make sure that he gets up and walks around, like whatever it is. And I've heard all the stories. And a lot of times the judge is going to go, okay, but educate him. You know how to do it, Mom. So why doesn't he come over your house and you educate him? Or more importantly, have him talk to Dr. X, Y, and Z. Do they have a nursing staff member there that's going to be able to train him? Oh yeah, they trained me. Okay, great. So let's have that person train Dad so that he can get familiar with exactly what he needs to do. Maybe he needs to take a CPR course, whatever it is. So we're going to be able to at least fill in that gap so that there is a level playing or more level playing field between the two parties. But we need to look at that. Again, if it's something like, do I have this surgery? Then the court's going to look at it and go, is it life-threatening? Is it required? What are the basis for each person for wanting it or not wanting it? And education is a little more simpler because it's going to be, they're going to this school. At the end of the day, the judge is going to make a determination. You're going to school X, Y, and Z. It's going to be mom's house or it's going to be dad's house, period. So we really have to figure out what is in their best interest based off of the facts of the parties and the testimony at trial.
And those are all really good points. And I'm sure that you could go on and tell us a lot of different and surprising outcomes that judges have come up with. And so that's really good to know. And when you let the judge decide, it's in their hands. You no longer have the chance to compromise, which, that might not be something that you want to give up. And so if you are trying to negotiate, what happens, what rights do you give up by letting the other side get their way?
It might just be that you're giving up that right for that one particular topic. So again, do they have this surgery? Well, it's elective, but I'll agree to it this time, but I'm not going to agree to it forever. And every separation agreement is going to have language that says, hey, if we waiver for something once, we don't waiver all the time. So again, we're able to make those decisions that it's not going to have an impact. Now we have the other opposite end of it where, mom goes, I don't care. I have joint legal custody. I've never exercised my rights whatsoever. I don't talk to any of the doctors. Dad takes care of everything. I've never even knew about anything. I just go, what school are they going to? And magically the children go to that school. So you have those parents that aren't involved. They have joint legal. And I go, hey, do you care if we're doing this? And it's radio silence. Well, then that's great. That parent has the right to exercise that because there's no opposition, if you will. So really, again, depends on that level of participation by both parents.
Well, that's what they say it is when you're negotiating, right? Both parties walk away equally upset about the outcome.
The judge makes the decision, that is going to be true.
Well, I mean, we've covered a range of topics on this, and I know that this is something we could probably do a whole series on. Is there anything that you'd like to mention before we go?
I think the only thing I'd like to mention is the fact that if you don't sign the birth certificate, then you as the father have no rights until you either sign the birth certificate or you're adjudicated the father of that child in a court of law. So really, I caution you to do it quickly if you don't really know the answers. But by the same token, I caution you that you don't have any rights until you sign it. So you really have to be assured that that's something that you want to do, whether it's right or wrong. But you really want to make sure that, yes, I'm going to move forward regardless of paternity or whatever the case may be. I am going to be the father of this child.
And we want that. We want to have as many parents loving the child as possible, as long as it's a good person and they can show good examples and try hard, right?
Absolutely.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate everything that you have to give every week, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say next week. And I want to thank everyone for watching. Thanks again, Nicole.
Thank you.
All right, bye, everyone.